Okay, I told Bo that he could say that about me because that's my fun fact whenever you start a class, is that I can't swim. So, yeah, I really can't swim because I choose not to, not because I can't. I hate the water. Anyway, okay, so tonight's sermon is going to come from 1 Samuel 16, and it's verses 1 through 13. And this is the passage where we first see David. Okay. The Lord said to Samuel, "How long will you mourn for Saul, since I have rejected him as king over Israel? Fill your horn with oil and be on your way. I am sending you to Jesse of Bethlehem. I have chosen him as one of his sons to be king." But Samuel said, "How can I go? If Saul hears about it, he will kill me." The Lord said, "Take a heifer with you, and I will come to sacrifice to the Lord. Invite Jesse to the sacrifice, and I will show you what to do. You are to anoint for me the one I indicate." Samuel did what the Lord said. When he arrived at Bethlehem, the elders of the town trembled when they met him. They asked, "Do you come in peace?" Samuel replied, "Yes, in peace. I have come to sacrifice to the Lord. Consecrate yourselves and come to the sacrifice with me." Then he consecrated Jesse and his sons and invited them to the sacrifice. When they arrived, Samuel saw Eliab and thought, "Surely the Lord's anointed stands here before the Lord." But the Lord said to Samuel, "Do not consider his appearance or his height, for I have rejected him. The Lord does not look at things people look at. People look at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart." Then Jesse called Abinadab and had him pass in front of Samuel. And Samuel said, "The Lord has not chosen this one either." Jesse then had Shammah pass by, and Samuel said, "Nor has the Lord chosen this one." Jesse had 7 of his sons pass before Samuel. But Samuel said to him, "The Lord has not chosen these." So he asked Jesse, "Are these all the sons you have?" "There is still the youngest," Jesse answered. "He is tending the sheep." Samuel said, "Send for him. We will not sit down until he arrives." So he sent for him and had him brought in. He was glowing with health and had a fine appearance and handsome features. Then the Lord said, "Rise and anoint him. This is the one." So Samuel took the horn of oil and anointed him in the presence of his brothers. And from that day, the Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon David. Samuel then went to Ramah. And this is the word of the Lord. Okay, so to start off, I'm going to have everybody close your eyes, okay? I can't see any of your eyes. I'm going to trust you that you close them, okay? Okay, everybody take a deep breath. And let it out. Okay, take one more deep breath. And let it out. Okay, keep your eyes closed and place your hands out in front of you like you're going to catch something. Okay, put them right next to each other. Now I want you to imagine that you're holding a little flower pot. Okay, there's nothing inside of it. Just think about the pot. Okay, now there's dirt in it, okay? There's just dirt. And think about putting a seed in there, whatever seed you want it to be. Okay, now just open your eyes and think about that while I preach. Cool. We'll get back to that later, I promise. Okay, so we're going to start with a little bit about myself. I grew up in the country. I grew up in a little town in Texas called Hockley, Texas. It was about a 10-minute drive to Magnolia, Texas, which is like a 30-minute drive to Tomball, which is like an hour. So I just say I'm from Houston, okay? But then while I was at college, my parents moved to Beaumont, or as Bo calls it, Memont. And I call that my home now because that's where I go and spend the holidays. But growing up, I lived out in the country. When I was 12, we moved out to about 3-acre little farm. I was homeschooled for most of my life. Homeschoolers, you're out there, I promise. At least my sister's out there somewhere. I grew up being a part of a foster family, so I've always had lots of siblings in my life. I have a sister and a brother, and I now have 3 more adopted brothers. So we're a family of 8. One of my favorite things to do is to spend time outside, just hiking or doing whatever you can outside. But yeah, I grew up on a farm, tending to animals. We had chickens and goats. So not necessarily like a shepherd like David, but I know how to take care of an animal. You know, it needs food and water, and you got to pick up its poop every once in a while. Like, it's really easy. Sure. But when I was 15, I was out at a summer camp, just living my best life, you know, church summer camp, those rock. And I was in that point in life where you start to think to yourself, maybe I should think about what I want to do when I'm, you know, an adult. And it was there that I have my call to ministry, which is to the mission field. So that's why I'm a missions major and not a pastoral ministry major, because I want to be a missionary. Woo! Yeah. So my call in the mission field is not to a particular place or people. Like, I don't feel led to go and be a teacher in China or anything like that. My call is into environmental stewardship and agricultural aid. So that's very specialized, I know, and it has no meaning. It has no meaning to me either. It is just what I am supposed to be doing. So I just am going to school to figure out how to best do Jesus work for the environment. Which doesn't make sense. Yeah, I mean, it beats me. And so I guess that's all about me, guys. I'm not that interesting. I just like to talk sometimes. And they gave me a microphone today. So we're going to jump now back into the passage. So to give you a little context for what we're seeing here, God has just told Samuel and Saul that he doesn't want Saul to be king anymore. And that was not very, great for Saul. Because the people of Israel had just, petitioned to God that they wanted a king like all the other nations around them. And God was like, I don't want to give you a king. That's not going to go well. And the people were like, but we want a king. And so he's like, okay, I'll give you Saul. And then Saul didn't do what God wanted. And so he said, well, you're not going to be king anymore. Which is, that happens when you kind of mess up sometimes. So that's why we start off this passage with God telling Samuel, why do you mourn for Saul? Because that's kind of like Samuel's big thing was he got to go and make Saul king, and I'm the cool guy. It's like, stop mourning for him. I've already rejected him as king of this place. Then, whoops, I was reading the Bible out of my Bible and lost my place. Okay. Thanks. Woo. Anyway, then Samuel seems scared, right? He's like, if I go out there, he's going to kill me. And because when the king hears that you're trying to go and replace him, and you're not replacing him with his son, because that's how kings work, you're going to look for somebody else. He's not really happy about that. But Samuel has the power, because he's God's guy, to be the one to make and break kings. So he's out there, and God's like, well, take this heifer, and you are going to just sacrifice it to me. You just happen to have to do it over in Bethlehem. If anybody asks, God told you to do it. It's not really a lie. It's just you're going out there, you're going to sacrifice to me, you're going to happen to run into some of these people, you just need to talk to them. So he goes out there, he's like, okay, I'm here, and the elders of the town are terrified. They're like, oh my gosh, why is he here? He's like, I'm here in peace, guys, I promise. I'm here just looking for one dude. He's here somewhere. I'm not here to bring a new regime. I'm just here to look for one dude. And the elders are like, oh, okay. And then it's like, so now what do we do? They're like, oh, well, you're going to come join us in the feast, duh. Like, and they're like, oh, okay. So they do the little like ritual, and now they're clean and they can do a sacrifice. And then they go over there, and Jesse's like, hey, what's up? And Samuel's like, hey, guys, I need to talk to your sons. And Jesse's like, okay, well, here they are. And like, could you imagine being there? Like, that would be so awkward to be like, oh, snap, he didn't choose him. Am I next? Yeah, I couldn't do that. No. I'd just leave. I'd be like, well, guys, he's not going to choose any of us. And there's this part where he says, do not consider his appearance or his height. This is in here in reference to when they chose Saul to be king. They chose him because he was tall and powerful. And like, because that's what a king should look like. So here it's like, well, the last guy, we chose him because he was tall and powerful. You can't use those factors now. So that makes Samuel a little nervous. He's like, well, if he doesn't look like a king, how will I know it's him? And so they just keep waiting, and they're like, okay, so it's not this son, it's not this son, it's not this son. And then like there's a couple of sons who don't even get named. They're just like, okay, it's just not those guys. So Samuel's like, well, we got to the end of your sons, and God didn't want any of them. What do we do now? And so he asked this question. He's like, so how many sons? Is this all of them? Like, you got one like in the closet. Like, where is he? And so Jesse's like, well, yeah, I mean, I have one more. He's like super young. He's out watching the sheep. You don't want him. He's watching the sheep. Like, he's just a little kid. And Samuel's like, well, you better go get him, because we're not sitting down till he gets here. So who knows how far away he was? Like, that could have been like, okay, well, we're here for like 2 hours waiting for him to get here. Like, because somebody had to go get him, and they had to walk back. Then, David shows up, and there's this whole moment where Samuel's like, oh my gosh, this is the one? But like, he's handsome. Like, God said we weren't looking for somebody who was like tall and powerful and the man. You brought me this handsome dude? Like, okay, I can get on board with that. This is, I guess, a king. Yeah. And then like he just sees him and he's like, okay, this is the one, and just anoints him right there, like in front of his whole family. Just pour some oil on him. Like, where do you go from there as a family? Like, you're like, so, David, you're just covered in oil here at dinner. Cool. Like, what? I don't know. That would, to me, be a very awkward family dinner of like, so, you guys all got rejected, did you? Well. And so he anointed him. He becomes filled with the Spirit of the Lord, and then Samuel leaves. And that's how the story ends. So, to put this in the context of the whole story of David, you probably have heard a story or two about David. There's David and Goliath. It's pretty like a big Sunday school story. There's, David and Bathsheba. That's not a Sunday school story. So this is what I like to call David's origin story. Like, this is where he first started. But like, we know some familiar names and places in his story. Like, we've heard of David, we've heard of Bethlehem, but in the whole narrative of the Bible, this is the first time we see it. This is the first time Bethlehem is named. This is the first time David is named. These all happen here in this first passage in this chapter. Immediately following this story in the passage is the passage when Saul is like, hey guys, I'm looking for somebody who can play a harp. And it's like, oh, well, I know a guy who plays a harp. His name's David. And Saul's like, okay, well, bring me David. I need somebody to play the harp. So that first story is all about God choosing David to be king. And unbeknownst to Saul, immediately following Saul is setting up the story for David to become king through Saul's choice. Then those two stories happen. That's chapter 16. Next chapter, chapter 17, is David and Goliath. So like he's still a little kid. Like it wasn't like time passed or no, like there he was. A little kid who basically just him and his brothers and his mom and dad probably knew that he was to be king one day because Samuel showed up and said, well, God said you're to be king. And then he goes and he's in Saul's court playing a harp. Sometimes he carries his armor for him. And then he goes and kills Goliath. So now, to throw it back to you, everybody remember your little pot with a seed in it? Okay, everybody close your eyes, place your hands back out. Look for it. It's out there somewhere. Okay, did you find it? Is it still there? Does it look the same still? Is your seed still in there? Okay. Well, what if I told you the seed, it's time for it to grow now into something else? What is it going to turn into? You get to decide what it grows into. Mine will always turn into a little itty bitty pine tree. Like, I don't know how it works. It's a fake thing in my imagination, but like it looks like a full-size pine tree, just a little itty bitty in a flower pot. You can make yours turn whatever you want it into. Because to me, we just talked about an origin story. It's the story of David. We talked about kind of my origin story, where I started, and the origin story of your little plant. It was a seed, and it waited, and it listened to me talk for a bunch, and then it grew into whatever you wanted. Hopefully, it was something useful. And that's what I got, guys. Woo! So, I think the band has one more song they could come and sing for us. So I would just challenge all of you to don't forget about your plant. Maybe water it a little bit. If you think about it this week, think about your own origin story. Where did you start from? Where are you going? What are you going to grow into? It's probably going to be useful. Let yourself be useful.